Welcome to Mindset and Stone podcasts, where we dive deep into the most compelling books on the shelf. Join hosts Dave and Poppy as they uncover the stories, themes, and ideas that shape our understanding and inspire curiosity. Get ready to explore the big ideas that leave a lasting impact. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Mindset and Stone podcast. Today we are intentionally stepping off the treadmill of modern existence. We're doing a really necessary deep dive into stillness. And our source material is the international bestseller by the Zen Buddhist teacher Haemin Sunim. It's called The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down.
It's a truly remarkable book. I mean, it sold millions of copies in South Korea alone. It just found this profound resonance by, merging ancient Buddhist philosophy with the crushing pressures of contemporary life. And Haemin Sunim, he's a monk who also spent time teaching at Hampshire College. So he uses this text as a powerful but very gentle guide.
And our mission today is to filter this extensive wisdom. We want to extract the core philosophy and the specific actionable techniques that you can use right now. It's really about finding clarity when your inbox, your commute, your calendar, everything just conspires to make you feel perpetually hurried.
And the foundational insight we have to start with is that true calm is not an external condition. It's not something you achieve by, say, finding a quiet beach or quitting your job. It's achieved by radically shifting your internal landscape. And this leads us directly to the book's central provocative question. It's the paradox that frames this entire conversation.
And what is that?
Is it the world that's busy, or is it my mind?
Okay, let's unpack this. I think for most of us, that question generates some immediate resistance. We instinctively point a finger at the outside world, the impossible deadlines, the kids' schedules, the sheer volume of information. We feel busy because the world is busy.
And that's the default setting of the mind, isn't it? But Sunim, drawing from this deep Buddhist tradition, suggests that the boundary between your inner mind and the external world, it's far thinner and more porous than we assume. The world isn't objectively frantic or objectively slow. It just exists. Our mind, through its attention and its judgments, it projects its subjective state onto that world, and that creates the reality we experience.
I see the philosophical point, but I have to push back a little for the listener here. If my boss sends me 50 urgent emails, that is an objective external stressor. How does Sunim reconcile that feeling of external pressure with the idea that the busyness is purely internal? Isn't that a form of spiritual bypassing, or we just ignore real systemic demands?
That's a really important question. It's not about denying the 50 emails exist. They're real. It's about how we process the energy those emails generate. The emails are data points. The resulting feeling of frantic urgency, the racing heart, the shallow breath, the impulse to panic, that is the mind's response. That specific feeling of being overwhelmed resides only inside you.
So the goal is to acknowledge the external input, but then immediately recognize that the whirlwind that follows, it's a projection of my own stressed mind.
Precisely. We need to look at the story he shares about his friend, the Buddhist nun, who was overseeing the construction of a large meditation hall. It just perfectly illustrates this focused reality.
Well, I found this detail fascinating. She was completely immersed in the project, right? But her perception changed based on her task.
Totally. She recounted that when she was focused on selecting the tiles for the roof, all she saw in her environment were tiles.
Everywhere she looked.
She was constantly noticing their material, their thickness, their pattern, their origin. They just dominated her perception. Then, when she shifted her focus to sourcing materials for the floor, the tiles just vanished from her awareness. And all she could see were floors, their color, durability, texture.
And the crucial insight there is that the world we inhabit at any given moment is an extremely limited construct. It's only the small slice of reality that our mind currently cares about. Yet, to our mind, that small, focused world feels like the entire universe.
It does. We're bombarded by sensory input, but our awareness acts like this powerful filter. We don't live in the infinite cosmos. We live only in the small, manageable sliver we choose to focus on. If we were forced to process every piece of information happening around us, we'd immediately short-circuit. Our mind creates the boundaries, and so it dictates the experience.
This gives us immense power, which brings us right to takeaway one, shifting the focus. So if I accept that the whirlwind is in my mind, how do I practically harness that power to change my experience?
Well, the first step is just acknowledging the location of the storm. When you feel overwhelmed, recognize that the world itself has never complained about how busy it is. The trees don't rush, the river doesn't panic. Frantic energy is a construct of your own making. So if you can train your mind to choose a different focus, a focus on patience, gratitude, or even just the next single step, the world you experience will correspond to that state.
Sunim give that simple, really relatable example of being crammed into a crowded subway car during rush hour.
And most people immediately choose annoyance, tension, and irritation. That's the default. But he suggests you can choose to see it as a moment of fun, realizing, hey, I'm so squeezed in, I don't even have to grab a handrail.
This is the same situation, completely different experience.
Exactly. The external stressor remains identical, but the internal experience transforms from suffering to passive amusement. The problem isn't the proximity of others, it's our perspective on that proximity.
When your mind rests, the world also rests.
That's the core of it.
Okay, that makes sense for fleeting moments of annoyance, traffic, crowded spaces. But let's turn to deeper suffering. Sometimes the negativity isn't just a crowded subway, it's genuine disappointment, deep hurt, or loss. We feel like we've been hit by something physical, something real.
And this is where we need to analyze the true anatomy of suffering. Our pain is often a compound thing. The original bad event is one thing, but the prolonged suffering comes from something else entirely. Haemin Sunim uses a profound analogy here. Tsunamis and tornadoes are terrifying, not just because of the water or the wind,
But because of the objects, the swirling debris they hurl at us.
yes. The debris in this context is the constant stream of mental rumination.
The thoughts about the event.
Our pain isn't just the bad event. It's the relentless, swirling thoughts about what happened. Why me? What if I had done this differently? They shouldn't have done that. That mental dwelling is what prevents the emotional wound from closing. We're actively keeping the information going.
So the strategy is to stop dwelling. This introduces takeaway 2, a practical strategy for letting go. And this is, well, it's a non-interference approach.
It is, and it requires immense trust in the process of time. When we're hurt, we often feel compelled to fix the feeling, to analyze it to death, or to immediately escape it. Sunim advises the opposite. Leave the unpleasant feeling alone so it can flow. The wave of emotion will naturally recede on its own, provided you don't feed it by continually dwelling on the narrative that created it.
He relates this so beautifully to that cooking analogy, cleaning a frying pan.
If you have burnt, stuck food in a frying pan, struggling to scrape it off immediately often just damages the pan and frustrates you.
We've all been there.
The wiser approach is to pour water, which represents time, into the pan, and simply wait. You relax, and after a while, the food loosens on its own, and the residue just floats away.
That acceptance of time is profoundly countercultural, isn't it? In our instant gratification world, we want immediate emotional resolution. So the message is, don't struggle to force emotional healing. We pour time into our hearts and trust they will heal when they are ready.
Yes. It emphasizes patience and non-interference over active force. When you're disappointed, that sadness is the school of life trying to teach you an important, often difficult lesson. And you're not ready to absorb the lesson when the raw wound is still fresh, so you relax into the present moment. Give your heart space, and the lesson, along with the lightness and healing, it will come naturally.
Okay, moving from general unhappiness to the really strong, specific negative emotions, anger, jealousy, hatred. This is the area where people feel most out of control. Most of us, our instinct is to suppress these feelings or we fight them.
And that attempt at control is precisely the common mistake. Our impulse is to either flee the emotion or confront and dominate it. But the harder we try to control or suppress a strong negative emotion, the more agitated it becomes. We might succeed in suppressing it for a moment, but it will always reemerge later, maybe in a more toxic form.
He uses that perfect image for this suppression technique, the muddy fish tank.
Yeah, imagine a fish tank where the sediment has been stirred up. If you want to see the fish clearly, submerging your hand to push the mud down only churns it up more.
Right, it makes it worse.
In the same way, pushing down anger or hatred only gives it more energy and causes it to resurface with greater intensity.
So the path forward is observation, not confrontation. The solution is separating the raw, intense energy of the emotion from its linguistic label, the static word like anger or hatred.
The labels are fixed and limiting. They trick us into believing the feeling is permanent, but the raw energy of an emotion is constantly changing, even if it's subtle. The core technique is witnessing this energy calmly until it morphs into something else, or dissolves entirely.
So how does one practically witness an emotion without immediately becoming identified with it? I mean, that's the hard part.
We have to reflect the emotion dispassionately, like a mirror, without judgment. When you feel a surge of rage, don't say, I am angry. That identifies you with the temporary energy.
You separate yourself from it.
Yes. Instead, observe its physical manifestation. Say, I notice a tightening in my jaw, a buzzing in my ears, a rush of heat across my shoulders. By avoiding the static label of anger, you depersonalize the energy.
That process of observation sounds incredibly powerful because it turns you from the victim of the emotion into, like, the scientist studying it.
It does. You are seeing the anger slowly changing shape, revealing a deeper root. Maybe it's fear, insecurity, or unmet expectations, or simply disappearing on its own. Everything in the universe is evanescent. And that's a term we need to pause on. It means constantly fading, constantly changing, never static. The relief comes from realizing that today's stress, this momentary feeling, it cannot last.
You know, that idea of pure attention being the highest form of intelligence, that's attributed to Jiddu Krishnamurti in the book. Why is that specific reference important here?
Well, Krishnamurti emphasized that when we pay pure, non-judgmental attention to what is, without interference of past knowledge or desire for future change, we unlock understanding. We're staring straight into the reality of the emotion, inquiring, and just feeling what is there without getting caught in the swirl. And then we realize the negative emotion isn't a fixed reality. It emerges and retreats naturally within the vast space of our awareness.
And this realization brings in that powerful metaphor of awareness as the wide open sky.
Awareness is inherently pure and limitless, like the open sky. Stress, irritation, anger, they are just temporary clouds. They can temporarily obscure your vision, but they can never pollute the sky itself. Recognizing this truth prevents us from being swayed. We regard them as passing phenomena, not defining parts of ourselves.
This leads us directly to takeaway 3, a mindfulness technique resting the mind. So what is the most practical application for accessing this stillness right now without, having to retreat to a monastery?
The most simple yet powerful action is to keep your mind anchored in the present moment. The clouds of thought, the noise that insists you're busy and unhappy, they only linger in the past or the future.
Right, regrets and anxiety.
Your regrets are past-focused, your anxieties are future-focused. When you intentionally bring your mind fully to the activity of the moment, the feeling of your feet on the floor, the sound of my voice, your thoughts will naturally rest.
The source gives a very specific case study for when you feel low or overwhelmed, the 3-minute challenge.
Yes. When you feel that dense, low energy, Sunim advises you to quietly observe the feeling for just 3 minutes. Don't try to change it, fix it, just gaze at it as if you're watching a tree or observing water flow. If you give that feeling 3 minutes of non-reactive attention, you will notice the energy and texture slowly changing. It's like watching an ice cube melt.
So the realization is that I am the vast silence that knows of the emergence and disappearance of the low feeling. It is not me.
Absolutely. So much of modern life is spent following thoughts blindly, even when we're awake, like mental sleepwalkers. This practice is all about reversing the flow of attention. Instead of letting our minds perpetually flow out into the world, we train ourselves to become intimate with the mind, to look inward, find our center, and rest in that stillness.
Okay, moving now from the internal mindscape to how this wisdom applies externally, particularly in our relationships. Let's look at the danger of overflowing zeal, which Haemin Sunim addresses through his own personal anecdote.
This is a fantastic lesson, particularly for anyone in a leadership or mentorship role, or even, say, a new parent. Sunim shared his experience as a newly appointed college professor, just filled with eagerness and zeal. He was dedicated, giving extra homework, hosting multiple events, pouring all his energy into his students.
He felt that if he provided maximum opportunity and pushed his students to their limit, they would naturally achieve maximum results. But his overflowing passion, it actually created resentment.
It just became too much. He realized that no matter how effective his well-intentioned teachings and guidance, if you aggressively demand someone take it, it can taste like poison. His zeal, his intense desire for them to succeed in his specific way, got in the way of the desired outcome. He was caught up in his own ego's need to be a great, effective professor, rather than seeing his students' reality.
This insight is so critical in the modern workplace. We often equate our personal feelings of doing a good job, our hustle, our intensity, with actual effectiveness.
You need the wisdom to discern that zeal and effectiveness are not always related. Often, zeal is driven by insecurity or ego. When we are overly eager, we become micromanagers. We have to learn to temper that overflowing passion, allowing others the space and autonomy they need to work harmoniously and effectively. The results are what matter, not the intensity of your effort.
Speaking of relationships and space, the book offers a brilliant visual analogy for relationship management, the fireplace analogy for connection.
This really helps manage that inevitable tension between closeness and independence. A healthy relationship is like sitting by a fireplace. If you sit too close for too long, you feel trapped, burned out, and you risk taking the relationship for granted, eventually developing resentment.
And if you're too far.
If you sit too far away, you feel no warmth at all.
So the key is dynamically managing the distance building in personal space, while still putting in sufficient effort to stay warmly connected.
It reminds us that the trouble is rarely the person themselves. It's the dynamic and the lack of conscious boundary setting. In a world where work from home has blurred all the lines, setting intentional space, both physical and mental, is more crucial than ever for maintaining warmth without burnout.
This sense of balance becomes vital when navigating disagreements over fundamental convictions. The unavoidable clashes over politics, religion, or deeply held personal values. This brings us to takeaway 4, prioritizing harmony over rightness.
The human ego is just. It's determined to be right. When we encounter an opposing viewpoint on a topic we feel irrefutably sure about, the conversation quickly devolves into a fight. Sunim urges us to ask a simple, transformative question. Is being right worth making the person in front of me unhappy or damaging our connection? Being right isn't nearly as important as being happy together.
That humility is tough because the ego tells us if we concede the point, we're abandoning the truth. But trying to convince someone to adopt our view often stops being about the truth.
And it becomes purely about ego gratification. The maturity lesson is recognizing that your thoughts are not sacred truths etched in stone. And here is the immediate litmus test for that. If you get angry while debating right and wrong, your enraged voice has just conceded defeat. Anger shows you lost control, regardless of the logical strength of your point.
Practically speaking, when you hear something that sends your blood pressure soaring, what's the immediate actionable step?
Sleep on it. Do not shoot off that instant, emotionally charged text or email. An instant reaction is nearly always regrettable. A wise person prioritizes peace and silence. Give yourself 12 hours. You'll find that the urgency to prove the other person wrong has dissipated, and you can respond with clarity, not defensiveness.
We're reminded of the story of Mang Sasarang, right? The arrogant magistrate who thought he knew everything.
Yes, and his master had to teach him humility, essentially saying, if you lower your head, you won't bump into trouble. That pride, that haughtiness, is the engine of conflict. If we treat people with deep humility, conflicts can be avoided because the other person feels respected and heard, even if they aren't converted to your view. You should aim to be the warm-hearted friend who listens attentively rather than the sharp-tongued debater.
This acceptance of others, even their frustrating flaws, flows perfectly into the journey of forgiveness, which Sunim frames as the ultimate act of self-liberation. This is takeaway 5. Forgiveness is self-liberation.
And the instruction here is uncompromising. You forgive not for them, but for your own sake, truly, completely for yourself. If someone betrayed you, they might not deserve your forgiveness, but you deserve to be free from the internal chains of resentment.
And the process he describes is not just a mental decision. It requires this deep physical acknowledgement of the pain.
It starts by allowing the anger and bitterness to surface and treating those feelings kindly, recognizing them as an inevitable part of the hurt. Then you have to append to how those feelings are manifesting physically. The tense muscles, the rapid heartbeat, the shallow breathing, the knot in your stomach. The body holds the score of that resentment.
Once you've localized the feeling, what is the liberating question to ask yourself?
You ask, do I want to keep carrying this resentment in my heart? Do I want to live as a victim of this person forever? Because if you hate someone, you think about them constantly. They are living rent-free in your mind. The person you hate becomes a long-term tenant of the heart, and they are just destroying your internal real estate.
That is a brutal and effective metaphor. The advice is clear. Evict them right away with a notice of forgiveness.
You're reclaiming your internal space for those who love you, for your peace, and for your own growth. Forgiveness is not a gift you give them. It is a gift you give yourself. And remember, if you keep clashing with someone repeatedly, it might be the world's way of holding up a mirror, asking you to look closely at yourself, because the flaw you immediately notice in them might be a reflection of your own.
Moving on to life goals, purpose, and managing that draining cycle of self-consciousness, that constant worry about what everyone else thinks of us, the book offers 3 extremely liberating insights.
And these insights cut straight through the ego's obsession with external validation. First, the reality check. People are not nearly as interested in you as you believe. They revert quickly to their own concerns.
Right.
If you can't remember what a friend wore last week, why do you think they are meticulously analyzing your presentation mistakes or your outfit choices?
It's exhausting to constantly live under the tyranny of imagined judgment. Stop spending hours worrying about how you appear.
Second, Haemin Sunim reminds us that not everyone has to like you. We don't like everyone, so expecting universal approval is a recipe for suffering. Accept this fact and move on. You cannot control how others feel or what they think. Their opinion is theirs alone.
And the third insight, which is maybe the most brutally honest one, related to purpose and self-sacrifice.
It's the realization that most things we do for others are, fundamentally, driven by our own needs. We sacrifice for our children because we desire their success. We pray for our family because we need them to be around. Unless we are truly enlightened, our preoccupation with ourselves, even in the guise of selfless service, is deep-rooted. We must be honest about our own needs and desires first.
The practical application is immense. Stop basing your actions on how you appear to others, own up to your desires, and align your life to what your heart truly wishes. This is the bedrock of genuine happiness and purpose.
And this leads us naturally to the quest for finding direction for those who feel unsure about their path. This is takeaway 6, finding your true calling, and it details 3 practical ways to increase self-awareness.
The first is simple exposure. Read widely. You can't want a career you don't know exists. You need to read up on fields outside your current. Sphere science, art history, politics, business biographies. Broaden your mental horizon to introduce yourself to new possibilities.
The second point tackles the dangerous assumption that you find passion just by looking inward in contemplation. You need real-life experience.
Get out there.
Yes. Try various part-time jobs, internships, or volunteering. Don't be afraid to dive in. Passion is often discovered through the act of doing, not just through reflection. Only when you're immersed in the daily reality of a job will you, if its stresses and rewards are a good fit for your temperament.
And the third way is the internal mirror, increasing self-awareness through interaction. Using relationships, not just professional ones, but dating, friendships, group work as a mirror.
Ask yourself, do I draw energy from people or am I constantly drained? Do I thrive under pressure and chaos or do I need structure? These interactions reveal your strengths and weaknesses in various contexts, helping you determine the environment in which you truly thrive. And please, do not select a career path based on what others will think of your choice, because, as we established, they are rarely thinking about you anyway. Choose where your energy naturally flows.
This entire system of finding direction and personal purpose is so powerfully motivated by the idea of encouragement, which ties back into the Buddhist concept of prophecy and faith.
Sunim shares the powerful story of his elementary school teacher, Mrs. Lee. Haemin Sunim was an average kid, nothing extraordinary. But Ms. Lee approached him warmly and told him, "You're going to be a good student and a role model for your friends. I trust that you'll become a great person who brings wisdom and happiness to a lot of people."
That expression of faith, that trust in his potential, became the primary fuel for his motivation. He studied harder and was determined not to disappoint her expectation.
It illustrates a fundamental human principle which mirrors the Buddha's prophecy of enlightenment for his 500 disciples. Belief motivates attainment. When you believe in someone's capacity, you unlock that capacity. One simple word of encouragement, delivered with kindness and hope, can genuinely change a person's future.
And once we have that direction, even if it's just a rough idea, the focus must shift to implementation. It's easy to dream big, but it's the small, manageable changes that shift destiny. And this is takeaway 7, micro-adjustments for macro change.
We have to remember Gandhi's powerful insight. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your behavior becomes your habits become your values become your destiny. Everything stems from that first single thought or action. Therefore, we must start small.
The beauty here is the simplicity of the suggestions. If you want to be healthier, don't overhaul your diet. Start by going to bed a half hour earlier tonight. If you want to lose weight, don't join an expensive gym. Drink water instead of soda today.
If you have a huge, paralyzing project, don't try to tackle the most complex section. Start by organizing your desk or making a list. Dream big, absolutely, but start small, with the most manageable change possible. The consistency of these micro-adjustments has a profound cumulative effect on transformation.
It's the permission to take the leap of faith, even if it's only a half-hour early bedtime. Overthinking and waiting for 100% certainty only produce anxiety and doubt. Action, even small action, is the antidote to fear.
Absolutely. The moment you start that tiny action, you are affirming your commitment to change, and destiny begins to respond.
What an incredible journey we've taken through this text. We started with the intense paradox of busyness, explored the power of radical self-observation, and finished with a roadmap to purposeful action.
We learned that busyness is located in the projection of the mind, and the world rests when our mind rests. We discussed how to treat strong emotions with calm observation, like watching a changing cloud, instead of attempting to suppress them.
We found profound wisdom in tempering our zeal, prioritizing happiness together over proving ourselves right, and recognizing that forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-love that frees us from the tenets of resentment. The root of happiness truly lies in self-acceptance and aligning our actions with our desires, not others' expectations.
And as we close, we turn to Haemin Sunim's theme in the epilogue, your original face. When you feel chased, worried, or hurt, when the world feels like a frantic storm, pause, breathe, and bring your awareness fully into the present moment. In that deliberate stillness, you are no longer tangled in the drama.
Wisdom is not an external thing you acquire through books. It arises naturally when we slow down enough to notice what is already fully and perfectly present within us.
The profound realization comes when you notice the silent observer within you. This observer is the part of you witnessing everything, the thoughts, the feelings, the external chaos, unharmed by the storm. This observer is luminous, all-knowing, and utterly still.
So here is the challenge we leave you with, the ultimate step in slowing down this week. Befriend this silent observer. Sense its presence in the primordial stillness beneath the mental chatter. This is your original face, the source of incomparable happiness, wisdom, and freedom. The deepest level of rest is realizing you already possess this stillness within, right now, completely independent of the busy world outside your window. Start small, be kind to yourself, and just notice.
We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a spark of inspiration. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and check back for more episodes as we dive into new worlds of thought, one book at a time. Until then, keep your mind set in stone and your curiosity open. This has been a Big L Riz Media podcast, where big ideas meet lasting impressions.